After months of planning, President Trump has called off his meeting with North Korea's dictator Kim Jong-un. The president wrote a letter to the North Korean leader saying, quote, based on the tremendous anger and open hostility displayed by your most recent statements, I feel it is inappropriate at this time to have this long-planned meeting. Joining me to discuss this development is CBN's chief international correspondent, Gary Lane. So, Gary, what do you think? What do you make of this sudden decision to pull out?
Well, it really doesn't come as a surprise. If you had listened to what the president had to say on Tuesday in his Oval Office meeting with the South Korean President Moon, what the president said at that time is, well, maybe it'll come off, maybe it won't, but that's okay. We'll eventually have a deal, or we'll eventually have something to talk about. I think, George, what the president was concerned about, he wants to see a summit that is successful. He doesn't want to make a deal just to make a deal like many of his predecessors did, because all the emphasis in Washington is always on making the deal, right? You get a deal, you get the Nobel Peace Prize maybe, or at least you have success politically. The president doesn't want that. Mr. Trump says it's either a good deal or no deal at all, George.
North Korea says recent statements by the Vice President Pence, and other members of the cabinet were uncalled for. What made the regime so upset just in the last 48 hours?
Well, I wouldn't say it was just the last 48 hours, but it's been recently, within the last few days. There's been this talk, and they have claimed, the North Koreans have claimed, this has been coming from John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, and Bolton has been talking about the Libyan model. I guess Vice President Pence also said a similar thing, referring to the Libyan model. Well, we all know what the Libyan model is, George. The Libyan model was, remember, Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. He came to an agreement on not nuclearizing his country, and then boom. Regime change, right? He was out, he was murdered, he was killed. That is Kim Jong-un's greatest fear, George, is that the same thing will happen to him. So when you start talking about the Libyan model, he says, uh-oh, this is what it's all about. I'm not going to talk to these guys. We're not going to have any kind of deal. And of course, the president backtracked a little bit. He criticized Bolton for those remarks. And then he said to Kim Jong-un, if you remember correctly, he said, look, you have nothing to worry about. You'll be secure. You'll remain in power if you reach a deal. If you don't reach a deal, you're out of here.
Yeah, exactly. And let me just bring this to our viewers' attention. This issue of the Libya model, it is so sensitive to the North Korean regime, because the last thing that the Kim Jong-un regime wants to see is him being taken out of power and
like
going
Gaddafi.
the way, going the way of Muammar Gaddafi, going the way of Hosni Mubarak of Egypt, as well as Saddam Hussein of Iraq. This is what Chu Son-hui, the North Korea's Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, said just in the last 24 hours. She said, quote, whether the U.S. will meet us at a meeting room or encounter us at a nuclear-to-nuclear showdown is entirely dependent upon the decision and behavior of the United States. She went on to add, we can also make the U.S. taste an appalling tragedy it has neither experienced nor ever imagined up to now. I mean, those are fighting words by the foreign minister. This is talking about a nuclear showdown with the United States.
It's all blustering. It's all what really can North Korea do? They don't really have the ability to put a nuclear device. They might have a few nuclear devices, but they don't have the ability to weaponize them, put them on top of a missile, and send them our way. They can cause a lot of havoc, maybe hit Guam with a missile or something, but they don't have the ability at this point to actually put a weapon, a warhead on a missile. In addition to that, George, their military capabilities are limited. I mean, they could cause more havoc, I think, for South Korea, running tanks and conventional weapons over the border, rather than actually harming the United States. Now, we've got 29,000 troops there. They could harm them as well. But as far as what can they do, you know, it's no match to what the United States could do. And remember what Trump said, fire and fury, like the world has never seen before on the Korean Peninsula. But I think a lot of this is just positioning
Yeah.
and blustering and coming back hard for negotiations.
So say let's take this approach.
Yeah.
If indeed this meeting originally scheduled for June 12th in Singapore does not happen, Senator Lindsey Graham said the other day that if this meeting does not happen, that's probably the end of diplomacy, and that Plan B would be military operations to stop North Korea's threat. What is the likelihood that we could go to Plan B, that the United States will indeed now decide for a military action against North Korea?
Well, there could be some military action, but Lindsey Graham, he's been a hawk for many, many years, and I don't necessarily agree with him. I think just because it doesn't come off immediately doesn't mean that it won't eventually happen. But the Chinese have also said, look, now is the time. This is the best opportunity the United States has ever had to reach a peace agreement with North Korea.
And President Trump said that in his letter today.
Well, President Trump agrees with that, but here's the thing. What kind of deal are you going to have? Because, as I've said before, Kim Jong-un is not trustworthy. He's never been trustworthy. His father and his grandfather before him have not been trustworthy. And so if you can't trust him, will you believe what he says, what he agrees to and puts down on paper? And I think the tower, the nuclear tower that was demolished the other day, was it yesterday,
yes.
wasn't it?
Today in North Korea.
Maybe yesterday North Korea time. But that has happened before.
Right.
That is nothing new. They did that years ago. They demolished a tower. So we've been down this road before. So I think the president is very good in being cautious about the next steps. He wants a good deal. He saw a bad deal. He said the worst deal the United States has ever negotiated was the one with Iran. He doesn't want to make the same mistake with North Korea.
And to that point, Gary, is it your sense that perhaps the president realized that he couldn't go into these talks and emerge with a credible deal that would truly see the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula? Because clearly in the last few days, the North Korean regime said, listen, if you think we are going to give up our nuclear weapons, you are dreaming. Is it your sense that President Trump realized going into this meeting next month will not yield this kind of a deal that he was looking for?
Well, I think Kim Jong-un, I'm sorry, not his father. Kim Jong-un also was looking to eliminate American troops. He wanted the 29,000 American troops that are in South Korea out of there. So it isn't just, I think there are differences on what we see, differences of opinion on what our goals are. His goal is to get the U.S. troops out of South Korea, to denuclearize South Korea, to get rid of the THAAD missile system, the anti-missile system there that the U.S. has put in place. The U.S. wants him to get rid of his weapons and to demilitarize. So, I mean, there are two polar approaches here, different approaches, or goals, I should say. And so will they ever be able to come together? I don't know. But all I know, and we can say at this point, is our president did not feel right, did not feel at this point it would even be worth him going to Singapore to do what? To talk with someone who is saying things against you and who doesn't really isn't really serious about making a deal. So better no deal than a bad deal.
Last question: is there a possibility, despite this letter that we have here from the President of the United States to Kim Jong-un, is there a possibility that Kim Jong-un responds with a different message, and that indeed this meeting does go ahead on June 12th?
Well, I guess
that all of this is part of the posturing, but by both sides.
Look, a lot of posturing, but I think we'll just have to wait and see on that. How is he going to respond to the letter? I think initially you're going to see a pulling back, and maybe a playing down. Maybe there'll be some initial posturing and rhetoric and so forth. But I think eventually you'll see some pulling back, maybe behind the scenes, some serious negotiations to try to still pull this off, because both sides really want this. And believe me, Kim Jong-un needs a deal more than we do.
That's right.
Because he needs American and Western cash. That's what he's looking for at this point. Even if he's pulling a fast one and trying to trick everybody, that's what he really wants and needs at this point. So I think initially there will be a big blustering and a big reaction, but eventually I think there'll be a pulling back and they'll get down to business trying to work a deal.
Okay, when breaking news happens, not just here in the United States, but around the world, I know that our followers on Facebook look to us here at CBN News to provide analysis on these such developments that take place. So thank you so much for joining us. As always, our CBN Chief International Correspondent Gary Lane providing an analysis for the latest on the North Korean situation and all of the other news happening around the world. Please stick to cbnnews.com as well as here on Facebook. On behalf of Gary Lane, I'm George Thomas. Thank you for joining us for this special report.